My name is Ernie Crey, and I'm the chief of my First Nation. It's called the Chiam, which is located about 60 miles east of Vancouver. It's a community of 500 people. If I were asked for advice from any group or organization about what young people can do about pressing social issues in Canada, where it affects particularly Aboriginal people, but even impoverished white people, it would be this, that young people, first of all, need to educate themselves about these issues in the lives of impoverished people in this country, people on the periphery, people on the fringes of society. Although it's changing for Aboriginal people, largely the majority of Aboriginal people still are the disenfranchised. They live on the periphery of society. We're slowly making our way to the center of society because of what are called Aboriginal, what is called Aboriginal title and rights and treaty rights in this country. These notions, these concepts are beginning to transform Canadian society, and it will transform the lives of Canadians and Aboriginal people because we'll have a bigger say and a larger part in the wealth and power and in positions of influences in this country, in industry and in government, locally, regionally, and nationally. For others, where youth are concerned, there is a lot of injustice in this country. And as with Aboriginal people, there is no percentage remaining outside of the system. My recommendation always, my advice to young people is to get involved in the system, especially the political life of the nation. Get involved with the political parties. Work hard to compel those political parties to adopt platforms that stand to improve the lives of youth, women, persons coping with disabilities, minorities who are exposed to sometimes contemptible attitudes on the part of the general population. To get those political parties to adopt platforms and policies that protect visible minority peoples, Aboriginal peoples as well, that favor women. Youth need to be involved in the political life of this country. You need to get directly involved in the political life of this society. Eventually, it'll be your generation that will call the shots where economic and social policies, health policies and the like, are carried out in this, what those policies say and how they're carried out in this country. There's no percentage in standing off to the side, simply being a critic or somebody who throws stones at the system. In order to change the system, you have to be directly involved. That would be my advice to a generation, the generation behind me, and even a younger generation.
Great, thank you. And then one more question. So the goal of this conference is called Promoting Reflexivity to Genocide of Indigenous Peoples. So if you had to, as an Indigenous person and as a chief of your community, what would you tell Stand about how we should, as an organization that's been so internationally focused through the 10 years of our existence, what would you advise us to do?
Well, first of all, Canada's part of the international community.
Yes.
It's a country. It has a government, and it's part of the larger human family. It's Canada's in and amongst a world that has many nations. So it's part and parcel of what's going on generally in the world, and. Canadians, young people, when it comes to genocide in this country, I've often argued that there isn't a physical genocide, but there have been policies in Canada which Ottawa and some of the provincial capitals have pursued that are genocidal in the cultural sense. In other words, Aboriginal people have been compelled, forced by law and policy and government programming, whether it's federal or provincial, to give up their identities, their cultural identities, their languages, who have policies that have prevented Indigenous peoples to keep their languages alive. You know, they were banished. Many of our cultural practices were at law banished up until the early 1960s. We didn't have the federal franchise in Canada until 1960. We only got to exercise it the first time, that is the federal vote, as recently as 1961. So in that sense, Aboriginal peoples in Canada have been forced to the periphery and compelled to abandon really their identities, because when you give up, you're compelled to give up the language and cultural practices, and you no longer have the power and the resources to pass on your cultural knowledge, the thing that made Aboriginal peoples a separate people, to the children. Then cultural genocide has taken place. Young Canadians need to be aware of this, and where and when they can, they need to stand shoulder to shoulder with any minorities in Canada, but most especially the Aboriginal peoples, whether they're Inuits, the Métis, or Indians, in defense of their right to a unique identity in Canada, which means their languages, their cultural practices, and opportunities to participate on an equal footing with all other Canadians. I think organizations like STAND are critically important. While their focus may have been outside of Canada, I think now is sort of time to turn the lens, so to speak, at your own backyard and see what's been taking place in Canada. See what it is you can do to stand with Aboriginal peoples. And I think you'll make a difference.